Good morning, people of Montgomery, Alabama. I, George Wallace, am here today to talk to you about my beliefs on the Sixties. I believe the most pressing issue of the era was the Civil Rights Movement. I view this movement with much contempt. Now, you probably know that I used to be pro-civil rights, but I changed my beliefs in response to the 1958 gubernatorial election of Alabama. During the election, I ran against John Patterson, Alabama's Attorney General, who was an advocate for segregation. Although I received the NAACP's support, he had the support of the Ku Klux Klan, and I was easily defeated. John Patterson used the state courts to declare the NAACP an illegal organization. At that point, I realized the pitfalls of the desegregation movement and became an anti-desegregationist. I began to run campaigns of racially charged rhetoric and even stated that John Patterson out-niggered me and I would never be out-niggered again. Using this rhetoric in my stance against desegregation, I was able to win the position of Governor of Alabama in 1963, 1971, 1975, and 1983, and I helped my wife win the gubernatorial election in 1967, allowing me to serve as First Gentleman of Alabama. While in office, I actively expressed my opposition to the civil rights movement. During my first inaugural address, I declared, "I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny, and I say, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever." Clearly, I was pro-segregation and wanted to prevent the black people from obtaining civil rights. I even made physical responses to the civil rights movement to demonstrate my link to the issue of racial resistance. My most famous action was my stand in the schoolhouse door, in which I blocked the door to the University of Alabama in order to prevent the enrollment of two African American students. My defiant actions made me a national figure, but I was only a hero to the white Southerners who were pro-segregation. I even ran for president in 1964 on a pro-segregation campaigns. My successes in states such as Indiana, Wisconsin, and Maryland not only revealed the white backlash to the social unrest created by the civil rights movement, but also made me an even more rabid pro-segregation candidate. When more fierce fights between the civil rights protesters and police broke out in Birmingham, Alabama, I responded with anger towards the protesters. I supported the police use of fire hoses and police dogs to restrain the protesters. After all, we didn't need a bunch of Negroes running around the town meddling in white men's affairs. My critics accused me of contributing to the atmosphere of intolerance and questioned me if I was worried about foreign responses to the actions we took against the protesters. As you might have expected, I responded with more racism, stating that the foreigners didn't know where they were and wouldn't ever know, and besides, we gave them countless dollars worth of foreign aid. However, my views in regards to the issue of segregation were not static. Ever since Arthur Bremer shot me at a rally in 1972, I have been paralyzed and have lived in a wheelchair. This paralysis has effectively changed my views regarding segregation. In the late 1970s, I announced that I was a born-again Christian and apologized to black civil rights leaders for my earlier pro-segregation positions. I have also renounced the position that I took in my stand in the schoolhouse door, saying that I was wrong. These days are over, and they ought to be. I announced I didn't want to meet my Maker with unforgiven sin. Finally, the other pressing issue of the 60s was the anti-Vietnam War protests being staged by the college students and other young ones across the nation. The outrage and the unrest they caused drove me to run for office of President of the United States in 1968 as the American Independent Party's candidate. I ran on a platform of law and order, expressing my opposition to the protests and calling for increased police resistance to the movement in order to uphold the law and impose order. My campaign slogan was, "Send them a message," for I wanted to send the college students a message that the protests and societal upheaval would not be tolerated, and I gained the support of many Americans with the same views of the protests, for I promised to bring about a more stable society free of unrest and violence. Although I knew I would lose the election, I hoped to gain enough electoral votes to determine the winner in order to make my mark on the 60s.